If you've not met us before, my name is Charlie.
I'm Naomi.
And we are two wellbeing coaches here at Isseropia Foundation. What it is that we want to do, if you're new to these kind of sessions, is to give everybody an opportunity to connect with some wellbeing content, to develop their self-awareness, potentially build towards actioning and setting some of their own goals, but really just to destigmatize mental health and give us that chance to better come to grips with it. With regards to our roles here, we are wellbeing coaches, which means that on a day-to-day basis, we are supporting our members, going on the front lines, supporting people and developing that awareness, and ultimately empowering them to progress and shape their lives as they want. What you can expect from this session, we're going to be having a really nice chat around developing a healthy and balanced lifestyle. And it's your opportunity to ask any questions, join in the conversation. We'll do our very best to keep up with the comments and to answer anything that you bring. But really, it's just a nice open forum for us to be able to have this kind of chat. Does that sound all right now?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So today we are presenting the second video in a series where we are examining Isseropia Foundation's model to wellbeing, which incorporates our 5 keys. So today we are looking at our second key, which is developing a healthy and balanced lifestyle. And this, in my experience, is often an underrated key, which if we understand it and implement it properly, can help us to find contentment and to help us to find our full potential. However, it is often a key that is quite misunderstood, and I think would be doing everyone a disservice if we didn't take a little bit of time to explore it and to understand what developing a healthy and balanced lifestyle means. So, Naomi, what does developing a healthy and balanced lifestyle mean to you?
I think personally, the main part of that is balance. I think if anybody doesn't know, Isseropia means balance in Greek, isn't it, Charlie?
It is Greek, yes.
So I think everything is about balance, and I think it's about finding the right balance that works for you. I think what might work for one person might not work for another person, and I think it's important to find out what does work for you and what your balance is in every area. So yeah, food, sleep, exercise, socializing, well-being planning as well, planning in your well-being, making that a priority, things like that. So it's about finding the right little bits of everything that make up your well-being, I suppose. No.
Yeah, no, I think I completely agree with you there, Naomi, as well. And it's that interesting thing, isn't it? You know, there might be some connotations with developing a healthy and balanced lifestyle. We might find ourselves thinking that it means it's sleep, it's food, it's exercise, but actually the reality of it is it's a much, much broader concept. It talks about total balance, taking into account so many different areas of our lives that often we can neglect, especially if we're not feeling full of confidence and not feeling well in ourselves. When we're having a little look at the Isseropia model for developing a healthy and balanced lifestyle, there are a few key components that we always want to be thinking about. Number 1 is sleep. I think anybody that's struggled can identify that they've got issues around sleep, whether that's struggling to sleep or oversleeping. Another one, of course, is nutrition. There's a few sayings about this, isn't it? You are what you eat. Is that one of them?
Yeah.
I think I heard somebody say to me recently, you are what you put on the furnace, which is another way of saying it, but I quite enjoyed it. But recognizing the important role that nutrition plays and the way that we feel in a given moment as well. Exercise, of course, can't be underestimated. Doesn't have to be that cliche word of exercise. Physical activity is plenty, whether that's getting up, moving, raising your heart rate a little bit, all of that seriously helps. But there are some other things, unhealthy habits. Naomi, do you think that at any point you've recognized you've got some unhealthy habits, whether that's present or in the past?
Yeah, I think I definitely had some unhealthy coping mechanisms. I think definitely had some of those in my past. But at the moment, currently, I don't think I do, which is good. But I'm the wellest I've ever been in the past year. So it's been a long time getting here. It is a process. But yeah, I don't think I have. Do you?
I've definitely got some, 100%. Yeah. And actually, just coming back to you for a second, I think it would be great if, as we go forward, we can unpick that a little bit towards the end of the session, because you're going to have some wisdom that I think could really benefit a few people as to how you've got there. But for myself, I've got a history of misusing substances. That's something that I've dealt with, but I've got one in particular that seems to be hanging around. Nicotine.
Oh, yeah.
Smoking. I'm going to say,
Definitely.
sometimes it feels nice to go out for those 5 minutes of fresh air, as we call it, but actually it's not something I'm proud of. It's actively damaging my health as well. So that's one that I want to be working on. Of course, unhealthy habits are a part of it, but there is plenty more. Activity as well is a really, really important part of developing a healthy and balanced lifestyle. And when we're talking about activity, I don't want to get it confused with exercise, because exercise has its own kind of section. Activity is finding something meaningful and going about it on a day-to-day basis, filling your life with something meaningful. Relaxation. I have supported so many people over the last 3 years that I've been working here who seem to have everything in shape. They're doing X, they're doing Y, they're looking after, let's say, their children, they're caring for a family member, they're devoting all of their time to their friends. But often we don't make time for ourselves. We can struggle to prioritize that. I don't know if that's something you've recognized for yourself as well, Naomi, at any point.
100%. A lot of the time, actually, that's probably going to be my thing. Actually, I think one of my main things at the moment is remembering that I'm important too. I think a lot of the time I'm a single parent. I've got 3 boys, and I work here at Zeropia, so I'm very busy a lot of the time, and I kind of forget that I need to look after my well-being too, and that I'm important as well. And that's taken me a long time to get to that point where I've started making that a priority and realizing that that's important as well. I think that's got a lot to do with self-confidence as well and self-esteem. And that's something I'm definitely still working on at the moment as well. And I think I'm going to continue to be working on that confidence and self-esteem, definitely, and realizing that I need to be treating myself like somebody that I like, and maybe, hopefully, one day somebody that I love. I want to get to that point, hopefully, but obviously it's a process, especially when you've been through a lot of things in the past. Getting to that point is takes a while to get there.
It does. It does, absolutely. I love that you brought that in, because developing a healthy and balanced lifestyle isn't anything that we ever accomplish. It's never a thing that we chalk off our list and say, there we go, I've nailed it, I never need to look at that again. It's something that constantly takes time and realizations, developing an awareness around where we might not be putting our focus and attention, and readdressing that and bringing it in. And in particular, confidence and self-esteem is another component.
That's massive.
It's huge, and a huge component of developing a healthy and balanced lifestyle as well. We do separate lives and workshops here at Zeropia where we do focus on confidence and self-esteem, but the beliefs that we carry about ourselves: am I worthwhile? Am I lovable? Have I got a place in the world? If any of these beliefs become unbalanced to a place where we're just focusing on the negative and not taking into account the whole wider picture, that's another component which is incredibly important for us to have our sights on as well. I won't bore you because the list could go on. However, another few key components here: connection, having social connection, making sure that we are seeing friends, family, people of importance to us fairly regularly, hugely important. And finally as well, spiritual beliefs can come into it as well. I've always found this one a little bit difficult to explain. And for those of you that are new to spirituality, it does not mean necessarily having a religion, although religion can be spiritual. To be spiritual, and it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on this one as well, Naomi, for me it means having your answers to the bigger questions, being able to feel that sense of connection to a greater purpose, or to be settled with how it is that you feel you are in the world. What do you say to that? That was a confusing sentence.
I think that, personally for me, I think spirituality is something that's a massive grey area, and I think that it's really interesting. And I think if you can find like-minded people that think the same way as you do, I really like talking about, I don't know if you do, Charlie, but I really like talking about like the universe, and like going really sort of like far out, and a bit like, maybe not Stephen Hawking, but maybe that other guy, who's the science guy.
Oh, Brian Cox, you're thinking of,
maybe a little bit more like Brian Cox. But yeah, I find it all really, really interesting, and like the possibilities are endless and that sort of thing, and that sort of side of things. I could talk about it for ages. So that's sort of my sort of version of it, I think. I like finding like-minded people, and that really makes me feel sort of like understood, and makes me feel like there's people that understand my head, I suppose, in a way.
Exactly. You're absolutely spot on with that. Again, there's that finding like-minded people, that commonality, being able to share in the experience of life together as you go through it, ridiculously important. But actually what you were just talking about there, answering the existential questions, the deep thinking, that is spirituality. And you could describe yourself as spiritual if you feel that you have your answers, in my opinion anyway, if you have those answers to the bigger question. another important component that we've touched on right there. We could talk for hours about space and all the possibilities and spirituality. But what we'll do is we're going to move on to the next section now to understand why is it that the things that we've just described there, why is it that they are important for us? Just before we do, I can see we have a few people that are following, just want to acknowledge them. Sam, it is very nice to have you. We are staying cool in the weather. I know you can't see this, but we've got thankfully an aircon system just over there, which is doing its best to keep us cool. It might not excuse the sweat patches, which might come, but there we go. Nice to have you, Sam. Amy, very nice to have you. Hello, Amy. And otherwise, we've got Kirsty who's joined us today. Kirsty, it is a pleasure to have you.
Hi,
Thank you for
Kirsty.
joining us today. So, without further ado, let us move on. Why is this important for my mental well-being? Why are some of those components, sleep, nutrition, exercise, having a tab on our unhealthy habits, activity, relaxation, connection, beliefs, confidence, self-esteem, why are they important for our mental health? And anyone who's attended one of the low mood workshops that I've delivered in the past will know that I'm very, very fond of a certain model. I think Naomi,
Yes.
yes, I talk about it a fair amount. But for me, there are loads of different models that we can use to explain mental well-being in any given go. Different models outside of Visceropia. And one in particular is called the biopsychosocial model. It might sound like scientific gibberish, and perhaps it is, but what it describes is that at any moment in time, our mental well-being is a component of three different factors. The biological, that is to say, our hormones are maybe an element of our genes, our brain chemistry and neurotransmitters, all of those are important for how it is that we feel in any given moment. And that can be an important thing for us to take into account. The sociological side of the model, the second wheel of the Venn diagram, says that our sociological factors are very, very important for how we feel. That's kind of connection, making sure that we have financial security, a shelter over our heads, making sure that we feel like we have our place in the world. And finally, the psychological talks about the power of the mind, the way that past experiences can shape us and affect the way that we see the present in any given moment. I don't think I need to go into it, but we all know the power of our thoughts, don't we, in affecting the way that we feel. And that's quite a well-recognized scientific model, but it kind of transcribes. It also talks about a holistic approach, which is much more where it is that we're at with this Visceropia. Whenever we want to understand somebody and the difficulties that they're going through, it is about taking this holistic approach, understanding mind, understanding body, understanding soul. And it's very rarely just one thing in particular that is causing anybody an issue. Sometimes it is, and it's easy to resolve, but actually usually it's a more complex set of factors that are contributing to the reason that we might be feeling unwell or poorly at any given moment. And it's why I don't know if this is true for you, Naomi, but when I was feeling unwell, I really struggled to unpick a single thing for why it was that I was feeling poorly.
Definitely. I think I've definitely felt the same a lot of different times in my life. I think sometimes everything can become so sort of entwined, and it kind of like snowball effects. One thing snowball effects, so if you're not sleeping properly, then that will then affect that you don't want to eat anything. You're not feeling hungry because you're tired, and then it will snowball effect to something else, and it will just be you won't want to exercise because you're too tired and you're not eating, so you haven't got that fuel. So it just all sort of slowly interlinks together. So in the end, sometimes it just becomes like this big sort of, you got like a black pen and just did a big scribble. So sort of like that's how it felt like in my head. Like I couldn't unpick that scribble and go, this is why I'm not feeling very good. It ended up being a cluster of things all at the same time, because I wasn't paying attention and making those things a priority in my life and making sure I had the right balance.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's that whole picture, isn't it? And there are loads and loads of different ways that you can help people. In fact, off the top of my head, I think there are over 400 different types of therapy that you might be able to engage in. And a lot of the time when we see somebody or we start to get advice about what can change, we might be given one single solution. You need to focus on that, and it can be really, really helpful. But usually it's a huge amount of different things that are going on. And this key in particular, what it allows us to do is to keep our focus in a much broader sense. It is about taking into account our well-being as a whole. So to revisit some of the things that we talked about, some of those little components there, I think it's important for us to talk about why they can affect our mental well-being as well. Sleep. So sleep is ridiculously important for how it is that we feel at any given moment. I would hope that we've all had our own personal experiences of this. When I haven't slept, I'm cranky.
Especially in this heat.
Especially in this heat.
At the moment, it's difficult, isn't it? I'm definitely struggling.
Yeah.
Definitely struggling in this heat to sleep. Yeah. Massively important.
It's true. And if we're not sleeping well, we don't find ourselves feeling emotionally prepared for the next day. We're not able to tackle the day as it comes, and we're actually a lot more emotionally vulnerable. It is just that much easier to send you into a state where you might be feeling overwhelmingly angry, sad, anxious. You lose that resilience when you're losing sleep. Yeah. Nutrition as well. I know we've said it, you are what you eat, but actually there are huge links with the different things that you put into the body and the way it can affect your brain chemistry as well. Won't go too much into that because I think we've probably got a good concept that if you eat really loads of simple carbs, for instance, so let's say McDonald's, not slate McDonald's, it's good, it's part of having a healthy and balanced lifestyle because you need to be able to incorporate the bad. But if you just had McDonald's, you'd feel sluggish, you'd feel a little bit slow. It's also linked, not McDonald's specifically, but eating bad food is linked to having a lower mood as well.
It's your gut, isn't it? It's supposed to be the chemicals in your gut are very closely to the chemicals in your brain. So a lot of the time, if you've got like bad stomach, bad tummy, or gut problems, a lot of the time you can probably have bad mental health problems at the same time because of that. The two are interlinked together.
Yeah. Huge importance. That link again, mind, body, soul.
Yeah.
Exercise, Naomi. Would you like to talk a bit about exercise? Because now I've only just got expertise and you're a bit more of a champion around this.
About that. I've always struggled with exercise, really. I think I go out with the children quite often. But exercising for me, it's not really been a priority, to be honest. But I started making it a priority in lockdown. I started doing yoga. I kind of had to, for my own sanity a little bit, I think, because I was looking after 3 children by myself. So I needed to do something for myself. But I had no motivation at all in any way, shape or form to do that. I was quite low in lockdown. I found it actually really hard. And I think a lot of other people, I think everybody did really. But I found it really difficult, especially mood-wise. I had no motivation whatsoever. Probably around a lot because of the anxiety that we were all feeling as well at the time. But I started doing yoga in lockdown, and I did it for an hour each morning an hour each morning, and it was amazing. But it took me quite a long time. I had to get my yoga mat out and then sit there looking at it for a bit, and then put the music on, and then get my yoga gear on, and then like do one stretch, and I'd get into it. But it took me a while to do it. But when I started making it a habit, and I was doing it every day, it became my new thing in the morning. It was great, and I felt better physically and mentally as well. So it's really powerful. I managed to get around to doing it 3 times a week on a good week now, but I do it at home by myself. I don't like going out and about with other people really exercising. I find it embarrassing, I think, to go out and about, especially like gyms and stuff. That's just not who I am, and that's okay. Everyone's different. But it works well for me doing it at home as well, because I do it in the time when I want to do it as well. So yeah, yoga is something that really helps me. I like swimming as well. That's quite good.
No, that's it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I love that you're talking there about being able to take into account our own personalities and personal choices.
Definitely.
I'm not a fan of the gym. For many people, they love the gym. But for me, it's much more about having that seclusion. Is why I quite like swimming as well. Because although you might be surrounded by people, you've got your head in the water and you're kind of focusing on your own thing as well. Yeah, exercise really important for good mental well-being, or at least physical activity. Unhealthy habits, if we're doing things like drink, drugs, smoking, for instance, they might be glorious, and I will use that term, they might be glorious in the short term. However, we're probably all at this point of recognizing that in terms of our long-term mental well-being, once that pleasure moment has passed, we are left with these delayed feelings of shame and guilt, potentially, of not feeling happy with the way that we've just conducted ourselves. And that in itself can reinforce some long-standing feelings around our confidence and self-esteem, or lack of. Confidence and self-esteem, it's hugely important to have these kind of fundamentals in our life and to work on them. Because if we're not feeling confident, if we don't have our self-esteem, it means that we're much less likely to be taking steps towards readdressing our life balance as well. So we're going to share a personal example with you right now, because of course we're well-being coaches, but I think we'd be doing a disservice if we pointed out the fact or said something like things are perfect all the time. Everybody has mental well-being. Everybody needs to be mindful of it, and sometimes it might take a little bit of a wobble or need some more focus and attention. And we were talking this morning Naomi and I was sharing with Naomi that in myself, I felt like I've lost my sparkle. Had lost, is probably the best way of putting it. Had lost it for a couple of weeks or so. I was feeling a little bit lower in mood. I was feeling less motivated. And I've just come back from 5 days of annual leave. And during that 5 days, I made it a priority for myself to start to unpick it a little bit and to figure out why it is that I was struggling with my mental well-being. I recognized I've just moved house. I've recently found out as well that moving house ranks on number 2 on the list of most stressful things that can happen in your life. So my foundations of stability, tying it into last week, completely shook up, absolutely uprooted and shifted to a new place. So that played a part in it. But actually, pausing and thinking about it a little bit more deeply, routine's very important to me. And I recognized that there were 2 key components that I wasn't giving as much focus as I used to. I'd liked. I wasn't spending as much time with my friends. I wasn't giving them the attention and care and love that I usually like to. And also, exercise had flown out of the window for me, completely dropped off. We'll come back to that in a little bit. I'll tell you more about some things that have changed, but being able to have that time to pause and reflect and recognize where that balance was lacking is incredibly useful, because when we have that knowledge, we're then empowered to take the next step. So we're going to move on in a second to what can I actually do then? If we recognize that developing a healthy and balanced lifestyle is important, what is it that we can do to change that, to take and move our life in a direction where we're feeling more content and fulfilling our potential? Before we do, just a couple of comments to go through. Kirsty, basic needs, absolutely. Bang on with that one. Sleep, food, exercise, shelter, and connection, all being huge components of that. Spot on. We have Sam, who's saying struggling at the moment with eating and sleeping due to the hot weather. Yeah.
Massive. It's so hot, isn't it? Literally, it's the hottest it's been in a while, isn't it?
It is absolutely boiling outside, and this might not necessarily help, Sam, but rest assured you're not alone in that. And it's always worth thinking about things that we can do to make that a little bit easier for ourselves, but it is a challenge at the minute. Kirsty, I like the whole phrase. Yes, brilliant. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, tired? Makes caring for our emotions much easier to pinpoint why I'm struggling. For anyone who's not come across this before, I think Kirsty, you've explained it beautifully. But if you're feeling a little bit emotional, you're not feeling as resilient as normal, not always, but usually it can be down to one of a few things. Are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? Are you tired?
And I think it's important to pay attention to those basic human needs as well, because if you think of it, I don't know if it's been explained before on the live, but I think the way that I like to explain it is if you think of it as a house and like the stability, the foundations, if the foundations aren't stable, you haven't got those things, if you're not making them a priority and you're not looking after those basic needs, then the rest of your house isn't going to be stable. So it's massively important that we look after those things and pay attention to them.
Absolutely spot on. Very well said. So moving on, understanding the issue, what can we do about it to improve it? And this is the difficult thing. We as coaches would always want to try and support you in uncovering your answers, but ultimately, you as an individual, you need to answer some hard questions that only you intrinsically are going to know the answers to. And at Isseropia, there are 3 questions that we like to ask ourselves. We try and keep it as simple as we can. What am I doing too much of? What am I doing too little of? And then the final question, what can I do to bring my life back into balanced, keeping that solution-focused mindset? For every imbalance, we can find a way of balancing it. For every problem, there is a solution. Everything is figure-outable. And this is what I find really interesting, Naomi, because I know before we start this live, we were going through it, talking about these questions. What do you do too much of? What did you say to me?
What did I say? I can't remember.
Don't think I do anything too much.
I don't think I do too much of anything, do I? And I was like, actually, I overthink a lot. And I worry a lot. I think there's definitely things that I do a lot of. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. I'm glad you've got some answers. If you came about blank about anything with genuine, I'd give you a gold star and ask you, how did you get there? But yeah, all of us are culpable of doing
probably
things.
Vaping as well, actually. I stopped smoking like 5 months ago, maybe it's a bit longer than that now. And I just vape loads now. I vape more than I smoked, which is weird, but I'm only doing like really low nicotine level. But so maybe vaping as well.
It's a huge step in the right direction.
Overthinking and vaping.
Yeah, overthinking and vaping. That's fair
Yeah.
enough. I'm glad you've got a list. Everyone's got a list, I think, anyway. And for myself to answer that question, things I'm doing too much of, I've already touched on it. Smoking is one that I want to be addressing. Did take some steps, fallen off the bandwagon. We'll come back to that. But smoking is one I'm doing too much of, and things I'm doing too little of, using this model. Spending time with my friends, I've taken some steps to address that, but also exercise. So the key thing for us to recognize here is that in order for us to feel more content, we need to start to materialize the change that we want to see in the world. If that sounded like a load of gibberish, don't worry. What it's basically saying is that we need to take action personally, take that responsibility and to start to take small steps to make those changes so that we can bring our life back into balance. It's about starting small, and it's also about engaging something else that we like to talk about here, self-discipline. Not necessarily relying on motivation. Motivation is great when we have it, but it's not reliable, certainly not been with me anyway. But using our self-discipline as well. So, sorry, Naomi.
I was just going to say, I think when motivation isn't there, I think for a lot of the time, for me personally, I have to just push myself to do things that I know that are good for me, that I don't really want to do. And I think a lot of the time, I have to kind of like in a way parent myself, like be my own parent, and kind of tell myself off and like push myself. You're going to do this now, and just be really kind of disciplined with myself. So when that motivation isn't there, I think routine and discipline can be really helpful. And I think after a period of time, if you keep doing that, then the motivation starts to kick in. But I think, when motivation isn't there, but just pushing yourself to do that is going to be really helpful. And sort of, I have to sort of firm over myself and tell myself off a lot of the time, just do it.
Yes.
Being strict with yourself can be helpful.
That's it. Being somewhat strict is definitely a good thing. And like I say, we can't always rely on other people to make us do stuff.
No.
Great to have that accountability, but it isn't always there. It's something that we need to work on in different areas of our lives. So this is a brand new thing for me. But having had those realizations that I had last week in my time off, recognizing that exercise was something I wanted to work on, I took the courageous and bold step of downloading the Couch to 5K app. It's a thing that I've heard a lot about over the last couple of years, but for those of you that aren't aware of it, it is a simple app that you can download, and it aims to coach you from somebody that doesn't do any running to somebody that can run for 5K or 30 minutes in roughly a 9-week period. You can adjust it as you want, but I took the step of downloading it, and I've gone for 2 runs recently. It's been a challenge. I've had to engage self-discipline. Before the run, it's about making sure that I'm taking those small steps, putting on my socks, putting on my trainers, plugging on my headphones, and making sure that I'm leaving the door. But even keeping up that self-discipline part way through. And I'm delighted to say, although it's early days, I can't call myself a runner yet. We're going to need to keep this up for a little while. I feel like I've already taken some steps towards developing that self-discipline in that area. And all of us are going to need to develop that self-discipline in the areas that feel relevant and matter to us.
I think sometimes as well, sometimes it's not just about pushing yourself to do things that are good for you. Sometimes we have to push ourselves, or not even push ourselves, but realize that we need to rest. I think sometimes we can like be so hell-bent on like doing stuff and like being like proactive and go. I don't know if anyone else can relate, but just being constantly proactive all the time and just not stopping. And I think sometimes something that's really, really good for us to do is sometimes actually stop and actually give ourselves some space and some time to go, actually, you know what, I'm just going to go and sit down on the beach for an hour and have my headphones in and just relax and have some time to myself and just let myself feel some things. I think a lot of the time, sometimes as well, this is something that personally works for me, and I have to try and fit this in because I feel like this is really important. So my well-being is having that time to actually just feel things. I think I spent a lot of time, especially when I was at my unwellest, running away from how I was feeling and trying to distract myself all the time, constantly with other things, outside things. So it'd be friends, activities, anything that would just take me away from, stop me from feeling what I didn't want to feel. And actually sitting with those emotions, giving yourself an hour to sit with those emotions and feel what you're feeling, and just letting that settle. And I think also remembering something that I, in the lockdown, that I really learned that was quite powerful was this, and also that it's okay to cry and to let those emotions out. And I feel like that's really important to put in there, as well as in a healthful and balanced lifestyle. I think that's something that's really important that we let ourselves do as well. And that's something that I've had to kind of give myself permission to do that and go, actually, do you know what? It's okay for me to feel this emotion. It's okay for me to feel this, and just give myself that permission to feel that, even if it was just for an hour, and let myself feel that emotion. Yeah.
I think it's such an important thing to say. You know, we're not going to be perfect all the time. We do need to give ourselves permission to take a step back from time to time. And also, you know, by giving ourselves that time to connect with our emotions, we can start to build an awareness as well. And this segues beautifully into the last thing that we wanted to discuss with you guys today, which is the cycle of transformation. So the cycle of transformation is a cycle that ultimately describes the process that we go whenever we're trying to implement change. And the first step of the process is unawareness. All of us sit in unawareness. It is a time when we haven't acknowledged a problem, we haven't given ourselves permission to feel. For instance, we might be in that process of running away. It can also be called denial, is another way that you can think about it. But it's before we're ready for a multitude of reasons to acknowledge that a problem exists and we might need to make a change. The second process that we have here or second step rather, is awareness. And awareness is that moment in time where we're like, okay, this is my reality. I understand that this is going on and I might need to make some changes. The next step, we can sit in awareness for a while, is intention. And intention is that moment where we again realize that there's a problem, we know what it is, and we are starting to mentally commit towards making a positive change in our lives. For me and the Couch to 5K app, that was downloading an app. That's what it was. Setting that intention, set Monday as a day to do it in my head, and starting to prepare and commit to that. Next, we have implementation. And implementation is just a single moment in time. It is that moment where we first start to enact that change. For me, it was starting to jog. For someone that was trying to quit smoking, it'd be the first time you resisted that urge, or you picked up your vape. It'd be the same for a load of different unhealthy habits that you might be trying to change. If you're working on your nutrition, it might be the first time that you go for a salad, or you change that meal that you're going for. If it was sleep, it might be making that decision to put yourself in bed a little bit earlier to give yourself more time to fall asleep. And ultimately, after implementation, we need to engage self-discipline, where self-discipline is that concept which will keep us maintaining that positive behavior for as long as we possibly can. Is that always possible, Nay?
No.
No, no, that's the bottom line.
Sure answer.
Absolutely not. We are all human. We all make mistakes. There are all moments where we might not feel like we can do something. I'm sure that in the future with my running, there are going to be days where I feel like I don't want to go for a run. It might be tipping outside, and I might have a moment where that self-discipline drops. The sixth stage, recognizing it's all part of being human, is a mission. It is that moment where we lapse away from that positive behavior. For smoking, might be picking up a cigarette for the first time. For eating, might be having a Mackey's or your second Mackey's of the week. It can be a number of things. And if we're not careful and we don't take a step to bring ourselves back into self-discipline at our own time when we're feeling ready, but quite quickly, we can go into something that we call a full-blown recurrence, which is where it can feel like you're back at square one. This is something that I've definitely felt in myself and noticed with other people as well. You feel like all that good work is undone. And then we might need to take ourselves back around the cycle again to get to self-discipline. Something which isn't understood though, is that every time we go around this cycle, we are gaining wisdom. We are getting valuable experience, which means that the next time we commit to making that positive change, it should happen that little bit smoother, that little bit quicker. And it should also mean that it's easier for us to engage that self-discipline. I know that when it comes to going around the cycle of transformation, it can take a number of times. In fact, and I can't verify this as a fact, I want to say this is my opinion quite clearly, but something that I remember a colleague of mine saying is that if you're looking to stop drugs and alcohol, for instance, it can take on average 8 times of going around that cycle.
Sorry, Tyler.
No, go for it.
I think it's the same with anything. I think when you're trying to break a habit, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take a couple of times sometimes, to be able to break that habit, especially when it's been a coping mechanism. I think having a coping mechanism for a long period of time, it's kind of like a comfort blanket in a way. So if we don't have that comfort blanket when we're going through stress, we need to be replacing it with something else. And if we don't have anything to replace it with that's a healthy version of that, then it's really difficult. It's something that does take time. And something that I learned in my journey was actually, the gap between the time when you go back to that old coping mechanism, and you think that you failed and it's all over, you failed, you're rubbish, and then all the negative self-talk comes back in again. The gap between those times become further apart. So it will become, so what I'm talking about is with self-harm. When I used that coping mechanism for a long period of time, the gap between that time got further apart each time. So it became longer and longer away. And it's been 4 years this year for me since I used that unhealthy coping mechanism, and hopefully that will never happen again. But it takes time, is what I'm saying. It takes time, and those gaps in between get further apart, and it does get easier.
Exactly, that's it. It does get easier. And although it doesn't always feel like it, we are constantly taking steps forward. We're always getting that wisdom building to self-discipline as well. And the more that we apply ourselves, the more we garner our willpower and apply self-discipline, eventually we will exit the cycle of transformation entirely when we reach self-mastery. It's a thing that I consider I've done with my historic drug use. No longer a factor for me. I think I've self-mastered that. And for yourself as well, like you were saying, with your self-harm, something that you've managed to understand and conquer for now. Mm-hmm. It's always about having that awareness about those other areas of our lives where we can continue to make those tweaks and improvements. Mm-hmm. So what I want to say is that when it comes to making these important changes, it is completely natural for us to have a fear around them. Ultimately, though, action conquers fear, and the benefits are well worth it. Naomi, I'm aware that we've completely overrun.
Yeah, we have.
Sorry, we're in the swing of things a little bit there, enjoying our time here far too much. But thank you for staying with us. For those of you that have been with us the whole way through, for those of you that are watching at a later date, thank you for staying with us for the whole thing. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you want to get in contact with us at all to discuss anything that we've gone through in the live today, or to connect with the workshops we offer in-house, just give us a call on that number that you can see scrolling down at the bottom. And otherwise, we will see you next Thursday at 10 a.m. for a similar live, where we're going to be having a look at the 3rd and 4th keys: adopt an open and positive mindset, and embrace acceptance and letting go. But for now, it has been a pleasure. Merry Friday.